Thanks, Your Worship. I believe we do. We have one director that's calling in remotely, and I don't see Mr. Greathead online yet, but I believe that he'll be here shortly, and we're ready to go whenever council is.
All right, well, I have not quite 6 o'clock yet, so we have seconds to wait. And it is now 6 o'clock, and I think that Councillor Wilson is nearby. There he is. All right, I will call recess to an end. I hope you all enjoyed the reprieve. We are back in our budget presentations for the 2022 budget. We left off yesterday having concluded the introduction, the strategic plan and service delivery cycle, proposed decision-making timelines, the environmental scan, and all departments presented with respect to the operational budget review. So we would be at agenda item 2.6 of the agenda that we started on yesterday. But Mr. Given, I will turn it to you to introduce tonight's topics and let you take it from there. And if there's a slight deviation from the agenda, that's fine.
Sure, Your Worship. Well, in terms of sections that we have left to go through, there are obviously community group requests, which we have queued up to go first with this evening's presentation. Then will be the utility-based budget, the utilities operational budget, and then finally the capital budget and some concluding remarks. Appreciate that on reflection or on percolation or letting things settle a little bit overnight, council members may have additional questions. And certainly administration is open to receiving questions from council over the course of the next week or so, and we're happy to answer those questions at any time. And we appreciate that really decision-making will be happening over the course of a couple of committee and council meetings. And so administration is fully ready to answer any questions that council members may arise for council members as they are considering the information that they've received. I know that it's been a significant amount of info that you've first been sort of sorting through on your own in hard copy, and then hearing presented and provided in context last night and tonight. And so I can appreciate that there may be other questions that arise as you reflect on the information that you've seen and heard, and administration is ready to support council with any questions that you may have to the best of our ability. So, Your Worship, with that and that invitation to council, I'm ready to start the presentation by focusing on the community group requests, if that so suits council.
Yep. Please proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Council, I'll just confirm maybe with a head nod that everybody can see my screen there. Okay. Okay. Well, welcome back to night 2 of budget 2022. I'm not sure that we could squeeze any more 2s in there. Night 2 of budget 2022. Or at least it'll take us 100 more years to get another 2. So tonight we are speaking about community group requests. Council on a committee meeting not too long ago received presentations from a number of different community organizations where the representatives of the organizations were there to make their request. Those representatives are not on this evening, and so administration does not have the full ins and outs of the organization at hand. If council has questions that they wish to raise, obviously we would have to go back to the community organizations to find those answers. But administration will need a confirmation from council on which community group requests you wish to have continued in the 2022 budget. So for clarity, administration, without any direction from council, has made an early assumption by including all of these items in the budget. What we're looking for, ultimately, when we come to committee meetings and council decision-making, will be for council to confirm which of the requests it wishes to see continued in the 2022 budget, and administration would follow up on that direction from council by removing any requests that council didn't direct us to include going forward. So as a reminder to council, the community group requests were from the Jasper Municipal Library. They were requesting what amounts to a 2% increase over the 2021 year at a total of $193,800. The Jasper Yellowhead Museum and Archives had a request for $49,000. The Jasper Artists Guild had two separate requests. One was a general request of approximately $2,350 and a rent decrease request. And so a request for a reduction in their costs of rental at the cultural center. The amount of that was $7,227.60. So their total request was $9,577.60. The next request was from Jasper Victim Services at $12,500. And the final group that had a request of the municipality of Jasper was Habitat for the Arts. Their request was also in two parts. The first was with respect to a reduction in the rent or lease costs for them at the cultural center. The amount of that was $20,000. And then there was an additional request for $25,000 towards staffing for the organization in order to help coordinate and offer more cultural programming. So that, Your Worship, is the sum of information that we have at hand for council today. Again, just to reiterate, administration had not received any other direction from council. And so all of these items are in the 2022 base budget and net tax requisition that's shown to council. But we will be looking for confirmation from council, a motion to confirm that council wished to have these items in the budget, or if it is not all of the items, which items council would wish us to continue to have in the budget, and we would remove all others. So Your Worship, I'm open to questions. I will pause my screen share and say that administration is open for questions. Again, recognizing that the representatives of the organizations are not here tonight. We did not request them to be here because the council did have them in a face-to-face by Zoom forum previously where you had the opportunity to ask any direct questions. But if there are any things that arise for council, administration could take those back and seek answers from the representatives, or administration could invite the representatives to come and present again to council, recognizing that they've already done so once. But Your Worship, I'm open to any questions, and there may not be that many this evening, recognizing the council's already heard from the organizers.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Questions from council, Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Gibbons, I just need to understand the rent request decrease for the Arts Guild and the Habitat for the Arts lease payment reduction. Where does that end up in our municipal budget, or does that affect the municipal library budget and their requests? In other words, were they counting on those revenues coming into the library to only request a 2% increase?
Your Worship, for Councillor Melnick, so the rent is due to the municipality of Jasper from all of the organizations. And so these reductions in rental costs would be essentially foregone revenue for the municipality. So it would be a choice of the municipality to reduce that revenue. If we held the organizations to the lease requirements or the rent requirements, then they would be responsible for making that up and paying it to the municipality of Jasper. The library's request is independent of any of these other requests from other organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, you might not have the number offhand, but I would be looking to get the information on what the previous year's rent for JAG had been, as well as not just last year, but like I guess 2019 year. So what the normal rent they had been paying. I just need to know like what percentage they're asking for reduction, as well as same question for Habitat. $20,000 seems quite large in lease reduction. So I would need to know like what they had been paying and if they've been making those payments. So I don't think they have. So yeah, anyway, so how much they've been paying, have they been meeting the payments, and I guess what kind of percentage $20,000 off of rent looks like. And I think that might be full rent reduction, like completely, I'm not sure, but that's kind of the information that I would be looking for.
Okay, Your Worship, if I may, for Councillor Wilson, that's exactly the kind of information request that administration can gather and bring back when we bring the operating budget and the community group funding to committee for decision making. That's helpful to know that that would aid your decision making, Councillor Wilson. I'm sure it'll be a benefit to other council members as well. Administration can gather that info.
Other questions of Mr. Given regarding requests from groups? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. My question is, with Habitat and JAG, the rent they pay, is it comparable to rents around town? I know JAG sells things in their space. Just curious if it is already reduced or if it's market.
Sure. Your Worship, for Councillor Hall, I know that Ms. Malinchuk is on, and she may be able to dig up both the past history that Councillor Wilson was asking for, which would allow us to understand a little bit better how the rents that are expected and whatever they have paid, how that might compare to market rates. I would say that it would be typical for rental rates in a municipal or public facility to be somewhat lower than out in the private sector. So I wouldn't expect them to be at that full rate, but council will be able to judge that for themselves. I'll just check and see if Ms. Melnichuk has been able to gather that information. I'll invite her to come on screen if she is able to provide us some background info on the lease rates for those organizations in the cultural center.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So to give some background information on the library rental spaces, I must ask if it is questioned to know what they're being charged or what they've been reduced to in prior years, if I might ask that of Councillor Wilson.
Oh yeah, definitely a normal rate. So like not 2021 or 2020. I guess it would be back to 2018 or 2019.
Okay, I will bring that up.
I apologize.
Sorry.
My screen froze for a moment just
Oh.
as you were trying to confirm the question, and I never heard whether you got a response or gave an answer.
No, I was still digging. Sorry about that. So in 2019, the rent amount was about just under 20,000 a year. And in the past, we have seen rent reductions for Habitat only, I believe, in 2019 and in 20 and 21. And if you want those amounts, then I can give those amounts. But it has been around 20,000 in the past for the entire year.
Okay, yeah, so 20,000 entire year for Habitat. And then since COVID, there have been some reductions. And does this I guess the $20,000 represents reduction in really the whole rent, not reduction from 2021 numbers.
I believe the request would be waiving the 2022 lease amount.
And then Jag.
Jasper Artist Guild is the same amount.
Okay, and then they're just looking for, so if it was 20,000, they're looking for a reduction of 7,227 from that 20,000.
Yeah. Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
While we're on this topic, can you confirm, Mrs. Melanchuk, that during the COVID period, monthly rental was waived for both of those entities during the months that our facility was forced to be closed because of COVID, correct?
Correct.
And is any amount of the reduction that is now requested part of any arrears that might be owing?
I don't know what their intentions would be to apply the money towards. I believe they're looking to reduce their rent for the year, but I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Well, the question more simply then, are either of those entities now in arrears of rent to the municipality?
I believe so, yes. Yes, one definitely is,
Thank you.
without going into detail.
Thank you for that. Other questions from councillors with respect to any of the requests from external groups? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mrs. Melanchuk. While you're there and you have the figures on screen, would you happen to know what the contribution was to the Yellowhead Museum and Archives in 2019?
Yes, the museum in 2019 received 49,000.
Any chance you might have 2018 there, since if it's on the screen, let's it's very good to know.
I would have to go back a little bit further. I didn't pull the data from 2018. I have 19 forward.
No, but thank you. To go back to a normal operating year, I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
If I missed hands, Councillor Hall, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm not sure if this is a question, just maybe a thought. If organization is in arrears and can't afford the rent, I wonder if there'd be another space we would have within our municipality that they could afford. I know we were talking yesterday about space being a premium and 2 new positions, and just my thoughts.
Thank you for that. Councillors, additional questions about the external group requests? Councillor Demota?
Just to follow up a little bit on Councillor Hall's question, I know that when the spaces were being considered, there were some modifications to facilitate things like kilns and other things up in that area. So items like that, if they were going to be moved around, would have to, we'd have to consider powered space and all the other codes that go around with that. But it is an interesting question. We do have a lot of questions on space, and I think now is the time to start thinking about what's viable for the municipality and what's affordable for the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, just I'll speak to that train of thought as well. We've gone through this for a few years with Habitat for Sure, Jag not so much, but these are really like premium spots. I am concerned that if we can't pay, if a group can't pay the reduced rent that is already offered, I don't think that we can keep offering this year after year. This is premium space that we have developed as a municipality. Again, office space could be utilized. I just don't think we can keep giving this space away. Unfortunately, it's sad to say, but as I do support the arts, and although, yeah, I don't think we can keep going into supporting this without seeing any type of repayment. So, of course, it's probably not the meeting to talk about it, but we were on the topic, and I think we'll have to have that conversation in weeks to come.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson and others for those observations. The intent of this evening is to get information to facilitate those necessary discussions at a future meeting. So let's try and focus on questions for administration now. Councillor Waxer.
I just wondered whether there were any plans around cultural programming and cultural services under the new community development banner.
Your worship, as Councillor Waxer notes, we're undergoing a significant change with the creation of the Community Development Department from the former Culture and Rec and CFS areas. One of the goals that we've set for the new director position is to explicitly encourage more participation and utilization of Municipality of Jasper facilities, including the Cultural Center and Library. So I see the municipality over the course of 2022 taking on more of a coordinative role, both in rec and culture. We certainly have a lot of cultural professionals and people that are leaders in that area. I wouldn't presume that the municipality would step in and start to take over cultural programming, but I can imagine our role evolving through the course of 2022. And I would like to do that in a thoughtful way and to work with council and community organizations, because I really see the municipality as having a supporting role because there are experts in their field. But having said that, it's unclear to me right now exactly what the municipal role will evolve to be, especially but I think that will become clearer as we go through the first half of 2022. And we'd like to do that in collaboration with our partners in the cultural sphere.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota.
Just a quick comment. It's not, I'm trying to stay on topic, but one of the reasons why we have an overlap in our priorities, our strategic priorities, is to help us in this situation right here. And before we start making any decisions or comments on, the viability of certain agencies or services, I think that we should look at what's in place right now for our strat plan, because some things may fall in under priorities going forward when we start to look at what we want to do for the next 4 years starting in January. So what might be a little stressful to look at right now might fall into place in a couple of months from now. So just to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any other questions for administration relative to the budgetary requests from external groups, or questions for administration that they might take back to those groups? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I do have a question, Mr. Given, if you could take this back to Habitat. The $25,000 they're requesting is for staff. Is that the word? I think I wrote that down right. Is that their staff? Do we?
Yes, they're looking. They're looking for a grant amount to support, and we could get the specified duties that they were expecting to do. But from what I understood from the presentation of the committee before, it was really to add more capacity around scheduling and programming.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Any other questions? If there are none, I will invite you, Mr. Given, to move us to utilities.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think you should see on screen the title slide for the utilities budget. So following the format that we did last night, and maybe just as a brief reminder, I represented the budget as a Pushunka doll, or a Ukrainian doll, where the one can go inside the next. And so on screen, we're going to represent the utilities budget at the departmental level, knowing that council has the service profiles in your budget package, and administration is happy to speak to any of the details in the service profiles. First, we thought it was important to highlight a couple of factors with the utility-based budget. First, that as council well knows, the utilities are structured to be a self-supporting entity with no requirement for tax-based subsidy. So we have the utilities funded budget, and we have the net tax envelope budget. And so they are separate from one another. The 2022 base budget with respect to utilities builds in the first step towards achieving our recommended asset management funding levels of approximately $1.67 million per year over 5 years. So the municipality of Jasper's 2017 asset management study recommended that in 2017 dollars, the municipality should be investing approximately $1.67 million each year into maintaining and improving our water and wastewater assets, physical assets. We are not there, but Budget 2022 begins our journey towards that number with a modest increase in transfer to reserves within the utility that ultimately would lead the municipality to achieving that $1.67 million per year beginning 5 years from now, so 2027. This increase to support that increased investment in asset management and infrastructure is equal to just over $300,000 in the 2022 utilities budget, and that is spread across both the utilities water and utilities sewer budget profiles. The other item administration wanted to highlight is that while the community and council are aware of the discussion with respect to a new rate model that is being based on the concept of connection charges, consumption charges, and capital charges, it's important to note at this stage that the decision about the rate model and the budget are really separate decisions. The decision about budget is how much revenue should the municipality collect through the utility to fund the operation of the utility and the repair and maintenance of our physical assets. The discussion about the rate model is, okay, now that we've decided how much money we need, how are we going to collect that money and in what proportions from whom? So they are slightly independent decisions, and we just thought it was worthwhile to bring that up right at the start of the presentation, because there could otherwise end up being a little bit of a chicken and egg sense. But really the question is, how much will it cost to run the utilities? How much do you want to begin to invest in asset management and repair and replacement of our infrastructure? That's a budget decision. The decision about, okay, how will we collect that and in what percentage from whom is the rate model discussion, which can follow after council has considered budget and ultimately approved a budget. So that's the process that we're recommending. Administration is still intending to bring forward for council consideration discussion on the rate model. But again, administration sees that as separate from the discussion on the overall budget for the utilities. So here on screen, you can see the the departmental profile for our utilities, water supply and distribution, sanitary, sewage and treatment, garbage collection, and recycling operations, and then of course their associated expenses. There was one item that was brought up last night Mayor Island, it might have been you that noticed on the utilities water service profile, there was a line item called other allowances and fees for elected officials. We did a little digging just to check to make sure, and we're not charging any of you any extra for water, and you're not getting any breaks just because you're elected officials. You have to pay the same rate that everybody else does. But what that was just a copy and paste of that category on some service profiles, particularly the council ones. The other allowances and fees for elected officials applied. In this instance, in the water utility, it is just other allowances. And that category includes things like small training amounts and uniforms. So it's a very small amount. It was simply mislabeled by having the longer label that did apply in another service profile. But the category is correct and it doesn't change any of the amounts, but just wanted to offer that clarity based on the question last night. So with that, Your Worship, I'll turn it over to council to ask any questions that they might have of administration. And again, just to reflect that you can see, I believe, the increase in transfer payments in the sewer service profile and in the water service profile, and that equates to that $300 and some thousand that I mentioned in terms of an increase of funding towards capital repair and maintenance. Your Worship, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon, and thank you for confirming that we don't get an extra bottle of water or pay for an extra bottle of water.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. If I might, just before I will, of course, turn it to council for questions, but the first slide that you showed, you spoke about utilities overall being essentially self-funded, at least at the operational level, and you spoke about achieving an asset management level of 1.67 million. I think you said about 5 years out. And so is that a target for funding reserves for utilities overall? That is 1.67 million annually into reserves as a reasonable expectation moving forward, but knowing that we couldn't achieve that level for a few years yet.
Yes, Your Worship. So that number does come from the 2017 asset management study. Administration hasn't validated that number to 2021 or 2022 dollars, and likely would have increased. But the recommendation at that time was that on an annual basis, to keep an appropriate level of investment in our significant underground assets for the water and wastewater utilities, as well as the wastewater treatment plant, that the municipality should be investing at least that amount every year. Administration doesn't believe it's a reasonable approach to impose that in a single year. And so the team had developed a strategy that would see a gradual step up until we could achieve that amount of funding on an annual basis.
Thank you for that. I will turn it to councillors for questions about the utilities proposal. Councillor Demota.
I'm just checking first if you can hear me. I had to change headsets here, lost my earbuds. I'm just wondering if there might be an opportunity to retrieve some revenue through some type of through business licensing or something to that effect, where we could maybe collect from the higher users on to help aid the payments on the sewage treatment plant, and not by, I mean, just being able to transfer those costs to tourists, or something to that effect, where it might be like considered an environmental levy of some sort, like something that we can work within the tools that we have existing right now to at least ease the burden on places like hotels, where we could pass on the cost to where it's being consumed. Just an idea. I'm not sure what the opportunities are.
Sure. Your worship, for Councillor Demota, I think something like that is possible. Administration could research that. And I would imagine that it could be something that we could build into the rate model. If we have an eco levy fee that is applied to high consumers, then that might be one approach. I know that you may be considering another opportunity, but to keep it within the utility, rather than sort of paid to the municipality and then have to be transferred into the utility-based budget. Another alternate approach that would have the same outcome and would potentially be able to show users exactly how much they're paying in that eco levy and give them the opportunity to decrease their consumption if necessary, would be to have that reflected in the consumption charge in the rate model. There may be other methods that we could do through a business licensing fee, but then we would start to, as I said, increase complication, which is not necessarily impossible, just would have to be well thought out, because we would have our business licensing department would have to be checking the consumption on an annual basis and then resetting, business license fees based on consumption, which is a dynamic factor. We already have a system of handling dynamically changing fees, and that is utility billings. And so we could conceivably reflect that, as I said, in an increased level. The consumption charge could increase along with the amount of consumption. Again, administration isn't proposing that today. This is really just to say that, yes, it would be possible to do something like that. We could do that through the rate model, but for this stage, administration is simply proposing to council what we believe the required revenues are for the utility.
That's great. Thank you for that. If I may just finish off, the reason I brought that up is when you see the numbers in front of you and the increments increase as time goes on, we have to start thinking outside the box for different ideas and maybe, think about how we're going to hold hands with our stakeholders in making this viable for everybody, and so that we're both successful at the end of it. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Given. Mr. Given and I did have a chance to discuss the local improvement levies that are on both the water and sewer detail page being exactly equal, or totaling $185,000 a year. And previously, it only shows $64,000. It is correct that they're being split or allocated between the two, water and or sewer. But for clarity, I would like to know what makes up these levies. Is this a new assessment? I understand it's not the 2% franchise fee.
Yeah,
Thank
yes, Your Worship, for Councillor Melnick. So in the budget profiles for water and wastewater, you'll see beginning in 2022 a revenue line item of local improvement levies in the amount of $92,000, so just over $92,000 in each. That is reflective of the cost the revenue that will come from the landowners of parcels G, B, and GC. The Connaught Utility Project was funded partially through the use of a local improvement bylaw. Then that allowed the municipality to ensure that the beneficiaries of those improvements, the people who are going to derive the benefit of having water and sewer pipes to previously unserviced lands, that they contribute to the cost of that development. And so that $92,000 in water, $92,000 in sewer, it represents the revenue coming from parcels GB and GC. For the interim, that is likely to be paid through the federal government, as they're still the holders of those. Should either of those parcels transfer into private hands, then the private landowner would be responsible for those costs. The balance of the costs, and administration predicts that approximately 50% of the cost of the Connaught Utilities project will be paid for through the local improvement levies, and the balance of the Connaught Utilities project would be paid for through the local tax base.
Thank you. And as I mentioned, the 2% franchise fee for delivery of electricity and natural gas to the park. That is not included in these pages. That is part of administration as other revenues, I believe.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Melnick. So the utilities, although, you know, electrical utilities are certainly a utility, but when we're talking utilities in the municipal budget, we're talking about our own in-house utilities. The revenue that the municipality collects through franchise fees, through ATCO, ultimately on individual ratepayers' bills in the area, is represented in the administrative budget as an income there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Waxer.
Sorry to ask you to repeat yourself, Mr. Given, but could you just repeat the local improvement levy and the percentage that would get covered by the owners and then yeah, sorry, just kind of missed those numbers.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship, for Councillor Wilson. And Councillor Wilson, I was doing that off the top of my head. So I really feel like I need to go back and make sure that I get my exact percentages right, which I don't have at hand right now. But it was approximately 50% by the general tax base and 50% by the owners of those properties. And really what it is the owners of the properties are paying a portion of the debt servicing. So the project was 100% paid for through municipal debt financing. And we already referenced the impact that that is having on overall municipal expenses beginning in 2022. Also beginning in 2022, though, we have a small amount of revenue, you know, of that $180-some thousand coming in from the those two parcels that receive that direct benefit. So it's about a 50-50 share, and the revenue will help us pay for the mortgage, if you like, on the utilities that we just installed.
And just to further question, so 50% to the general tax base kind of sounds like a lot for something we're not really benefiting from, but what we are benefiting from is being able to tax that many more properties in the future, right? So it's a longer win, but is that kind of the understanding, or?
Yeah, yes, Your Worship, that's certainly a part of it. I mean, and this is maybe a little bit foreign here in Jasper, but you know, a significant part of the reason why municipalities make investments in water infrastructure is because where water goes, growth happens. We certainly don't have that ability outside of our town site boundaries, but it is a common experience, you know, in other municipalities where, you know, they'll extend a pipeline for water and wastewater out to the next quarter section over, and you'll have a new neighborhood will spring up that will generate new tax revenue. We don't have that ability here in Jasper, and so this is probably the most limited example that we would see. But it is true that if and when new housing is built on either Lot GB or Lot GC, that new housing will have to pay municipal property taxes. There is a proposal for a private development, as council and the community are well aware, on parcel GB. Some early indications of that development is that it would likely add an additional $20 to $30 million to the municipal assessment base that would pay property taxes. So it's sort of an indirect, you know, the municipal utility is going to own the infrastructure, has the responsibility of paying the debt on the infrastructure, and collecting some of the revenue through the local improvement. The municipality ultimately could be a beneficiary, again, if and when new housing units are built there, or new units of any kind are built there, because our property tax revenue would increase. And that is not, you know, administration isn't making any, isn't basing any future years on that. That would be a bonus, because ultimately I think the intent of the Connaught Utilities project was to provide opportunity for new housing development, which is sorely needed in the community. It wasn't a revenue play for the municipality to try to increase our own revenues. But that would be a very welcome side effect.
Thank you for that. I think Councillor Waxer was next, and then Councillor DeMoto.
Again, in the spirit of seeking to understand, I was curious, in both water and sewer, there are salaries and benefits as well as contracted services, and I just wondered what the difference was between those two categories.
Well, I can speak to a bit of that. I know Mr. Greathead is on the line and Ms. Malinchuk is here as well. But in both categories, first off, with respect to the wastewater treatment plant, the municipality uses a private contractor to operate that. So council will remember that we recently agreed to a 10-year operating agreement with Aquaterra Utilities. And so that would make up the significant amount of the contracted services on the sewer side. On the water side, and Mr. Greathead, you may be able to give more information on this, but I believe that a significant, in the utility, we call on a number of we have significant need of specialized resources, particularly engineers and consultants when it comes to planning. And we foresee a significant amount of planning work on an ongoing basis. So John, maybe you want to speak to the types of contracted services that we use in the water utility.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Yeah, Mr. Given pretty much encapsulated it correctly. Having said that, we also do contract out a lot of our repairs for hydrants and valve replacements within town. Most of the emergency repairs done are assisted heavily with the contractors, local contractors, to help us get things fixed up right away. So that's what that line is for. And just for reference, it's not uncommon whether we go in to fix a service line or a leaking curb stop to incur $20,000 in contracted fees for one of those digs, given the depth of the services and where we're at and the rocky soil conditions. It just makes things that much more difficult, so which drives costs up. So I hope that answers the question, Your Worship.
Thank you. Mrs. Waxer, did you have a follow-up?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, I put my hand back up right away because I didn't want Mr. Greathead to disappear. Because we can't have a discussion about water supply and distribution without me bringing up bulk water. And the reason I do that all the time is because I remember with your preliminary research that you found that we could have some good revenue potentials, and the squirrel in me is always looking for a nut. And so I was just wondering if that was factored into the 2022 numbers going forward.
Your Worship, if I may, yes, that we've submitted a development permit to Parks recently for the expansion of the S Block parking lot, and that's where we would be installing it. We're still in the design phase with WSP. We would have got it more completed earlier, but JCOS took everything we had to get that through this year. So unfortunately, the bulk water sanitation station and the rehab of the existing sanitation station at S Block is still planned. It's still ongoing. We just had to shift our priorities this year.
Okay, so there, for clarification then, the revenue dollars that might be associated, I know it's going to take some time to pay off, and there'll be capital expenses and there's transfers in for that, but we could potentially see a little bit of relief once that does get built. Okay, great, thank you. I'll keep bugging you until then.
In the absence of other hands at the moment, Mr. Given, to you or through you to Mr. Greathead, although I see he just disappeared. I'm sure he's still there. On the recycling, now I've forgotten what the right term is, profile. The revenue is sale of goods and services. Can you tell me whether that is strictly recycling fees that are charged to property owners, or is some part of that made up from the actual sale of recyclables? And if so, what amount comes from the sale of recyclables?
Your Worship, I'd have to ask Ms. Melanchuk's help on that, and I don't think I could get you an accurate answer on that because we haven't gotten through the whole year. As you know, I've appeared before council and explained how the recycling market was going through like very big oscillations and corrections, and I think we're seeing a little bit more of that accordion factor. So sometimes the materials that we're bailing up are actually making much more money than we were last year, and then the very next truckload we may not get anything at all for it. So it's that's a really hard thing for us to pin down right now. But again, I don't have the split of what the sales to fees would be.
And I can appreciate that. To the extent that a budget is just a forecast, what have you forecast in terms of the market for recyclables? Or do you just forecast zero and hope that it's better than that? Mrs. Melanchuk, if you're prepared.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This year we were going off of a few years of trending and kind of being a little careful with it, not going overboard with what we could potentially get. So far this year, we're sitting at about 40,000 actually, so that's great. We're way over budget on that, 29,000, because it was really, really bad the prior year. So we were being very cautious and just budgeted another 30,000. So the amount that you see is the levy and the amount coming from the recycling funds that come from actually getting them shipped away and whatnot. So a little bit better. It was really great a few years ago, and then it took a big turn, as we all know. So yeah.
Your Worship, if I can just add to that, there are a couple other positive indicators. Again, administration is taking a cautious approach and not over-promising. But Mr. Greathead and the team have recently restarted the refundable bottle collection across the municipality. It had been closed during COVID as a COVID prevention measure. So we recently restarted that this fall. The municipality is essentially collecting our bottles and we're turning them in and getting our nickel or our 10 cents or 25 cents wherever possible. So there will be revenue from that in future years. We have brought that service in-house. So we're doing that with existing municipal staff. So without adding additional staff, we're going to be able to capture more of that revenue because I believe it was previously handled by a contractor. And then additionally, council may remember a conversation at the Alberta Municipalities Conference just last week. The provincial government is moving forward with their ERP, so Extended Producer Responsibility Program, which is intended to fund recycling initiatives. It remains to be seen how much of that revenue will be shared with municipalities. The concept of ERP is that the manufacturers have a responsibility for the ultimate end use or disposal of their products, and that they should have some responsibility of funding that ultimate cost. Every other jurisdiction in Canada has been collecting from manufacturers for that purpose. Alberta is a bit late to the game, but the provincial government has approved that. And EPR, sorry, I think I said ERP. I'm not sure if I was thinking of Wyatt Earp. We're gonna have to track down the bottles and rustle them up. But the provincial government has passed that legislation. I think there's some advocacy for municipalities to do, and at this time, administration hasn't changed our revenue projections or reduced any of our costs because it's not clear to us yet how much of that revenue might be shared with municipalities, if any.
Thank you for that. I had one more question, but Councillor Demota, I think I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
No, mine was on something specific. I wanted to address plastics, so I can wait if your question is more relevant to the conversation.
I was going to switch to solid waste, so if
okay.
you're still, go ahead.
Semi. Okay, just because I remember that there's a long way to ship our plastics out of town, and I didn't think of the question earlier until we started talking about it here, and And just on the, the costs of materials, goods and supplies or contracted services, I wish I was into recycling plastic because that's the best business model going right now. People pay to bring stuff to you and you charge them for it. And then you sell it as a new material. So you're making money on both ends. If I knew how to do that, I wouldn't be selling kombucha. But having said that, I'm just wondering if some of those costs are spread out through garbage collection and disposal. Because for me, the $17,000 for an annual cost for shipping out recycled material seems a bit low.
Your worship, for Councillor Demota, certainly Mr. Greathead can clarify that. I'm not certain that that's reflective of all of the transportation costs for the entire program for the year. Mr. Greathead?
Mr. Governor, you're right. Thank you, Council. Yeah, and right now to be able to give you an accurate forecast on that again, I would need some time on that. But what we do with the plastic bales is they're so much lighter than our other materials, so we can actually cram quite a few of those plastic bales onto a truck. So that the cost of shipping plastic is one of the cheaper materials. It's more the bulk or the volume as opposed to the weight that we are able to send out. And we hoard quite a bit of our baled plastic out. We have a fenced area and we save several bales before we ship that all out. So we do have some reduction cost. It's the volume of plastic is nothing near the volume of cardboard that we process.
Is there any cost recovery right now in either of those fields? I know you mentioned some already overall, but
some for cardboard right now. Currently, we're doing okay on cardboard. Plastic still is a cost.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. And a question then, presumably through you, Mr. Given, to Mr. Greathead. Again, on the utilities solid waste profile, under the planning assumptions, there is reference to an RFP for solid waste and recycling master plan to be issued in early or mid 2022. I'm wondering whether you, Mr. Given, or Mr. Greathead can just give us a refresher on what you hope to gain from that particular master plan. Is that essentially just efficiency optimization within the department, or can we expect other deliverables through that master plan? And finally, is that funded in part through the contracted services?
Your worship, right now we're still doing our in-house analysis on the utility, or on the solid waste and their recycling and the overarching overarching problem, highlighting many of the inefficiencies. Some of the trucks that we use, they're quite large and bulky. They have large blind spots. Our alleys are tight. We have problems with the locations of the garbage cans. Some are privately owned, some are publicly owned, some are publicly owned but on private property, some are privately owned but on public property. There's a whole a myriad of problems that we're looking to address and looking for efficiencies, right down to, are we using the right garbage bins? Are we using the right vehicles to pick the garbage bins up? Even are the bins we're using, do they meet today's standards with accessibility? And just to assess if there's better options out there. We've been using a system for many years. One of the efficiencies that we have started is we actually purchased a compactor this year. Council gave direction to administration to buy a compactor truck last year. And we expect delivery of that in January or February this year coming. So, and hopefully that will increase our efficiency by hauling less air back and forth to the landfill. So right now, We've got a list of our problems. We're really working on building our RFP out to find a proponent to work with us to develop a master plan for solid waste and recycling. So we had some money in there, and I believe the funding wasn't approved last year through the Healthy Communities Initiative. And I'm not sure where I've got it. Sorry, I'm lagging and here, and I'm having trouble pulling up the documents as I'm in the meeting.
Sorry, I wasn't sure whether you were still looking for something, but I don't need more, but I do appreciate that response. And I really do appreciate your focus on increasing efficiencies in solid waste and recycling collection in particular. So I encourage you, the earlier in the year you can get on with that, the better. And if there are other things that you need to bring to council to help spur that along, I would encourage you to do that. That can lead to substantial efficiencies and potentially some savings as well. So I really like to see that in the service profile. So thank you very much for that. Any other questions for Mr. Given or Mr. Greathead regarding utilities? If not, I have one concluding question, Mr. Given. I've been doing some rough math on the table beside me, so please forgive me if I'm faulty in that math. But I'm just looking at the path ahead in terms of transfers to reserves and eventually meeting that target of $1.67 million annually for asset management. And my rough math indicates that we were at about $365,000 for transfers in the utilities departments overall last year, and we are looking to go up to a little over 900,000 this year, so an increase of about 560,000, leaving us another 700 to go to get to that target, if that is still the target. My question is, after that long ramble, does the increase this year reflect the fact that we are trying to make up ground from the last 2 years and reductions in transfers, particularly through COVID? Because it doesn't look like an equal progression to the target. It looks like a bit of a kickstart this year, and then perhaps reduced increases in subsequent years. But are we faced now with the fact that we cut transfers in previous years and now have to make up lost ground?
Your Worship, I just want to confirm first, your math that you were doing, were you taking the transfer payments from all 4 utility profiles?
Yes.
Okay, so the goal of the $1.67 million is, and Ms. Malinchuk can confirm this, I believe, but that is focused on the water and wastewater utilities alone. So it does not include transfer payments for solid waste, which would be, there are obviously assets that need to be maintained on the solid waste side as well, but those are exclusive. The $1.67 million of is exclusive of that solid waste. My broad understanding, though, is it is not the case that we were behind. We just have never reached that goal that was set. So there were reductions in transfers to reserves in previous years, but that is, we just lost ground in maintaining the assets. We hadn't necessarily lost ground that we have to make up by larger leaps and bounds going forward. But it is a little bit longer road than the math that you had done on your table there would lead you to believe, if you're including the solid waste utility, because we can only look at the water and wastewater utilities with respect to that 1.67 million goal.
Thank you for that clarity. Any other questions then for Mr. Given or Mr. Greathead related to utilities? If not, we get to move to capital budget. So think hard. Are there questions? All right, I am going to say that there are not. Mr. Given, we are now an hour in. At some point, it would be appropriate to take a break. I'm not sure whether you would expect we can get through the capital budget in an hour or whether councillors think that is sufficient time. I'm fishing here. We could take a break now because it's a logical place, or we could go for another half hour and then take a break. I'm at the will of council.
Your Worship, I can offer that there's a bit of a brief introduction to the capital section before we get into the actual discussion of the items. And so I could go through that brief introduction, and then we could move, sort of move our night along and then have the break afterwards. But by all means, if folks are ready for a break, administration can work with that as well.
Right. Well, I think your suggestion is a wonderful compromise. So let's do the introduction and see where that takes us.
Okay, thanks, Your Worship. Again, shifting to presentation mode. I believe you should be able to see my capital budget title screen. So just in terms of introductory comments, and they actually won't be that long. Under the Municipal Government Act, municipalities are required by provincial legislation to adopt multi-year operating and capital budgets. And in the past, those multi-year budgets have been presented to council as individual sections. So you would have a 2022 capital budget, followed on another page by a 2023 capital budget, and so on. In an effort to try to improve the ability of council to get a clear understanding of how the capital budget looks over time, administration has adjusted the format to show the 2022 to 2026 years on a single page by department. So the intent of this is to give you a better sense of how large capital projects may be split across years, or how there are maybe annual capital programs that may be ongoing in nature. In this format, projects from the prior year that are incomplete or not yet closed off in our financial books, but are proposed to be continued into the 2022 financial year are shown as carry forward projects, and those are the items in green. And so we tried to make sure that those stood out. Those are not new requests, but administration through policy does need to seek approval from council to carry forward a capital project that was approved in the prior year but not complete. And we will have some discussion. Councillor Wilson, I know that you had questions about carry forward projects, and so we have some discussion on those this evening by departmental area. So that's what the green tabs are throughout the budget. And then there are also larger projects that require committed funding over multiple years and maybe from multiple sources. Those could always be a little bit complex to represent when you're trying to show that a project that starts construction in 2022 may continue construction into 2023. And there isn't really a choice to say, well, we want to provide the 2022 funding, but not the 2023 funding, because it really is one project. And it also is further complicated by the fact that for large projects, you can have multiple funding sources such as municipal debt, provincial and federal grants, and sometimes a mix of all three applied to a single project. In other cases, a project may be funded through one funding source in a given year, and in another year, it may be funded through a different funding source. And so administration wanted to be able to identify that through this new format as well. But the shaded projects, the shaded areas, are multi-year projects of a larger nature, and administration gives you the project total. And then if you follow that out, you can see how that project total is supplied over the course of multiple calendar years and multiple funding sources. Finally, those future years, as I referenced out to 2026, are forecasts, and they are subject to annual council review and approval. So, so for council's comfort, with a few exceptions, we're not seeking council's approval of the 2026 capital spending plan. In fact, you'll see that it's not particularly well populated. There's not necessarily a lot of spending in 2026. Not zero, but it isn't as fully populated as it might be. Administration is going to evolve this format and really build our capacity to supply council in the community with very solid forward projections of our capital need and projects and improvements that will be needed over at least a 5-year time frame. But council should not be concerned that you're giving carte blanche support to administration to go ahead with a project in 2026. Every year you will see a rolling update to this document, and administration will be seeking council support for the upcoming year and sort of that formal approval before administration started any project. And again, the only exception to that, and we have a significant one, which we'll be talking about in detail later on in the presentation, is the activity, what I'll call the activity center renovation. It really is the activity center, aquatics and fitness center, and the arena. But I am, for ease of use, calling that the activity center reno project. That project obviously is one unit and cannot really be broken apart. So there is some portion of the construction that will happen in 2022, and some portion of the construction that will happen in 2023. So administration, is working under the understanding that when council approves the 2022 budget, you'll be giving us approval for that shaded gray area, which carries into the 2023 year. So I hope that that's a clear explanation of our intent there, and just a little bit of an orientation to the format. I just will, before moving on to any of the service areas, I'll just pause there to ask if there are any questions about the format before, Your Worship, maybe we take a little bit of a break and then reconvene to start talking about the capital by service area. So I'll pause there and ask if there are any questions about the format. Your Worship, we just don't have your microphone.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I see no hands up, but it might be an opportune time as part of the introduction just to confirm the legend and the items so that everybody is aware of what CRMR, ICIP, and MSIC might mean.
Sure, absolutely, Your Worship. Yes, thanks. That's one thing that I didn't put up on the slides. On each page of the printed document, again, that was published in the public agenda and is available to the public there, there is a legend for funding sources that are identified on the chart. CRMR is capital repair, maintenance, and replacement. This essentially reflects transfer to reserves. So on the operating side, we may have a transfer to reserves, and where we start to see that appearing in the capital budget is through that CRMR line. And so that is funding that was collected in the operating side and brought across. The ICIP is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. That is mostly related to the activity center renovation project across the 3 different facilities, and a smaller part in the log cabin. The Municipal Sustainability Initiative is the provincial, a long-standing provincial grant, previously known, as MSI. The debenture, I think, is straightforward. Those are areas where the municipality is proposing to borrow money, and ultimately we would start to see that borrowing show up on the operating side as debt payments over the course of the borrowing. Restricted reserves is another reserve format. And then there's also a smaller one that's used only in a couple of instances, and that would be ID 12. The improvement district around us does from time to time make capital contributions to the municipality of Jasper. So that's reflected in the table, but again, only used in a couple of instances. There is the Federal Gas Tax Fund. So the FGT is the federal gas tax. That is a grant provided from the federal government through the provincial government. And then finally, there are unfunded projects, and we'll speak a little bit more about unfunded as we go through. And we have a little bit of a discussion about that. But unfunded projects are projects which administration are on administration's radar, either in the upcoming year or in some future year, where we have not yet either dedicated committed funds to, or identify potential external funding sources. So there are projects that we know and believe that we will need, but are not funded in this budget or in any other one yet. So as we go through, those are opportunities if council wishes to fund a project to do so. There is one other smaller one that I don't believe appears in the legend, but you'll see, well, and this is maybe a little bit more of a detail, but there is one other funding source, and that's a CFEP donation. So that's a grant from external sources specifically related to the skateboard park project. And so that shows up in the table as well. But I think that covers all of the different items that might show up. It is a good demonstration of how the municipality is seeking funding from any other potential source on a regular basis, and how there's a connection between transfer to reserves, which we see in the operating side, and our ability to do capital projects in the current year through the capital repair, maintenance, and replacement funding source. Worship, I think that covers again probably all the introductory remarks I can make, and if council wanted to take a bit of a break, now would probably be an appropriate time.
Thank you for that. Again, just before we break, if there are questions on the format or on that legend, now is the time. It's important that we all speak and understand the same language as we progress through the capital budget discussion. So if everybody is happy with their understanding of that legend and the format, now is an appropriate time to take a break. It is now 7:15. I can give us 10 minutes tonight, so we will reconvene at 7:25 and commence with the capital budget presentation. So thank you all for that, and see you momentarily. Right, we are all reconvened, so we can carry on. Mr. Given, you've given us the introduction, so did you intend to go through the details of the budget at this time, the capital budget?
Your worship, much like our discussion earlier about the budget and how it can be wrapped up in a number of different layers. For our presentation, we're going to go at a bit different, at a higher level, providing an overview for tonight's presentation, knowing that council and the community have access to the detailed operating budget in the package that was provided. So I'll share my screen. We'll start first with the community development capital budget summary. And council, I know that there was some requests from from council members in Mare Island. We certainly will be sharing this slide deck with all council members and make it available to all of you. So you'll have these. I know that they are new, but they are merely summaries of what is contained in the detailed budget document with a look specifically at the 2022 year. So in community development, and which is the combination of the former CFS and culture and rec areas. And the most significant amount of the capital work is obviously in the former culture and recreation areas. Significant carry forward projects that administration is proposing to bring forward from 2021 to 2022 include the arena ice plant relocation, log cabin renovations, and some portion of the major activity center renovation design costs. Significant new projects proposed for the upcoming year are the activity center major renovation construction, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Curling rink air supply and dehumidification, aquatics mechanical room air supply, aquatics exterior finishes. The skate park is reflected in the budget as a new project, in spite of the fact that it was approved by council last year. I did receive a little bit of communication from the skate park committee from Daryl, and he's still hopeful, still waiting on a response from the provincial government, but that project does show as a carry forward. We have not taken the debenture for that project. We haven't started paying any interest on that project. We certainly will wait until we hear about the CFEP grant application. Daycare yard drainage has been a significant problem in the facility, and would be an opportune time to proceed with some addressing of that issue along with the major activity center renovation project. And then there are also in the 2022 year some significant significant unfunded projects or projects that are currently unfunded that may be of interest to council. The total of unfunded projects in the community development area for 2022 is just over $111,000. And that includes 3 projects. The arena sound system components is not funded this year, but is something that administration foresees that we will need to do in the arena to complement the recent improvements in the ice and boards. There's also a need for an upgrade and replacement of the arena hot water system. And then also very specifically, I want to identify that we have we are carrying an unfunded item in the capital budget with respect to expansion of the outdoor volleyball courts. So council will see that there is a $9,600 line item, which reflects the request that was made to the last council for funds to help support the addition of a second outdoor volleyball court and a slight redesign of the existing one. So those items that are unfunded do not have any funds attached. I mean, by definition, they have no funds attached. If council wished to fund them, then when we get to the committee of the whole or council is considering the capital budget, that would be our opportunity to make a motion to, recognize a project as a funded project. I'm highlighting the volleyball courts because we made that commitment to the previous council when they forwarded that request to the 2022 budget discussion that we would highlight that. Administration has reviewed the volleyball court project, and while we will be, while the budget does propose to do significant work at the activity center, the fitness aquatic center and arena, none of that was for grounds. The grant funded project, the major renovation, was very specific in its aims and really was focused on life cycle repair and maintenance of some of the core mechanical systems of the facilities, as well as improving accessibility in a number of different areas. And so administration couldn't see a way to make that, even though it was small, administration couldn't identify a way to make that volleyball court project really fit into that grant funded project. So if council wishes to support that expansion, it's going to have to come from municipal dollars in some way. And so it's there for council's consideration when we get to decision making on capital budget. Your worship, if I can, before taking questions, I am happy to take any questions on the line items. I would like to have some discussion on the activity center renovation project, given the scale of the project, and also additional information that administration has since we started with our project manager and have started some of the assessments through the facility. So I'd like to continue on, maybe to focus on that a little bit. And then I'd be happy to take any questions from council on any of the items in the community development capital budget. So if that's okay with you, your worship, and with council, I'll move into the focus on the activity center major renovation. So as council and the community are likely aware, the major renovation of the activity center, fitness center, and fitness and aquatic center and arena, which I'm calling the activity center reno just for shorthand, was originally conceived in 2017 before being submitted to the federal government ISIP grant program in 2019. In budget 2021, the past council approved proceeding with the design and engineering portion of the project. So administration does have between those a few different lines split across the activity center, fitness and aquatics, and arena. Administration had nearly $1 million in 2021 to begin the consideration of that project. One of our first steps was to engage a project manager to ensure that we had the capacity and expertise to be able to handle a project of this complication and size. And we brought on WSP projects to be able to help us with that. Since we've brought them on, we have initiated a detailed investigation of the Fitness and Aquatic Center to check the condition of its facility, it as a facility, and also to provide us with information about alternative options and comparing the cost of improving and maintaining that facility compared to two alternate options of a new facility on an adjacent site, so somewhere else on the grounds, or a new facility in the same physical place as the existing aquatic center, because administration does have some concerns that about the physical assets that are there. And so we're doing our due diligence right now using that engineering and design money that council provided in 2021. Another function that we've undertaken using that engineering and design money has been to relook at the scope of the project and to relook at, with the assistance of some cost consultants, to get some more current cost estimations. Budget 2022 does include a cost escalation for the activity center renovation project to reflect that the likely construction costs for the project are significantly different in today's market than they would have been when the project was first conceived in 2017. Some examples of the cost increases from 2017 to 2021 are in steel, gypsum board, plumbing supplies, mechanical supplies, electrical, wood. And council will remember that at the start of the budget presentation, I reflected to council some of those global factors that have arisen from the pandemic that are impacting the price of not just consumer goods, but also the specialized goods that the municipality needs, as well as labor costs. All of these items are putting upward pressure on the forecasted cost of completing the activity center renovation project at its original scope. Those increases in materials are also in addition to increased delivery costs due to increased transportation costs and projected increase in the cost of trades and labor from the time the project was originally conceived in 2017. Altogether, administration with the assistance of WSP estimate that the project will increase the actual construction cost at its current scope by approximately $1.1 million, leaving us with a total project cost of $8.1 million. These project costs at the more reflective of a 2022 construction build are the numbers that are built into the 2022 budget. And they are also reflected in the 2012 to 2052 debt profile that council saw previously. That was a little mountainous graphic that I showed. At the revised project cost, the activity center renovation will be supported 55% through grants from the provincial and federal government and 44% by local taxpayers. So still the majority of the cost of the project funded by other orders of government. But administration felt that it was very important that we identify this to council. And really the alternatives available to us are if council is not inclined to provide that additional funding in the 2022 budget, then administration would have to revise the scope of the project downward to fit the available budget. We do not have the ability to go and apply for additional grants to fund this increase, this escalation in costs. And so essentially we would be looking to fit the project into whatever available budget the council is willing to support. The municipal contribution to the project will be funded through debenture. And so it is something that would be the generations of Jasperites and users of the facility would be paying for that cost over a number of years through borrowing, as reflected in that borrowing chart that I showed you. Finally, a couple of other important notes. Council will see next week a recommendation from administration to engage a prime consultant to assist us with actually doing detailed design. So at this stage, we are simply taking the 2017 proposal, updating the costs, and we have not yet been able to go to market to actually sort of tender a detailed updated design to find out what actual construction costs will be. Administration's direction and intent would be to move forward with a fixed price project so that if council approves the additional funding to reflect an $8.1 million project, that we would move forward with a fixed price and we would not exceed that project cost. So I can appreciate that that's some significant news and certainly meets, I think, the standard of significant new projects. And so I'll just return to that capital budget summary page for community development. And I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have about the activity center renovation or about the community development capital budget in general.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
So we had a little action there. I think my dog ate something, but we'll carry on. So my question, I'm a little bit distracted. How long do we have the funding from the provincial government? I find it uneasy going into a project with unknown costs and increased costs in material, labor, etc. Is this a project that has an imminent timeline that we have to move forward on it? I know, like you said, Mr. Given, there are some concerns about the existing buildings. But do we need to pull the trigger this year?
The most direct answer, Your Worship, for Councillor Wilson is that the funding expires in 2028, and the municipality is required to use it before then. And if we don't use it by then, we lose it. I think the more nuanced answer, though, would be administration's advice is that we should not expect significant cost savings going forward. I mean, I think the vast majority of the increase in expense, obviously some is due to pandemic causes, but there were a number of pre-pandemic years where the project didn't progress. It really is just a reflection of a concept that was scoped in 2017, seeing nearly 5 years of regular inflation, plus all the weirdness of COVID that's going on. When the municipality, so recently, when administration was interviewing prime consultants, and again, we'll bring that recommendation to you, and we can speak to that at committee when we bring that forward next week. One of the key questions that we asked the prime consultants was what their strategy would be to mitigate COVID cost increases, and really a couple of the answers were the use of a construction manager, and bring a construction manager on board as early as possible, securing products as early as possible, and hoarding them or keeping them on site rather than waiting. And then also sourcing locally where possible. So rather than, and I don't necessarily mean in Jasper, but I mean in Canada, we know that global markets have been impacted, and certainly for some of the specialized products, we may have choices between Canadian or North American suppliers and suppliers that are offshore. And all of the, well, certainly our selected prime consultant gave good advice in all those areas about strategies that they have been employing through the pandemic to hold costs in line, even through all the uncertainty that we're seeing. So, that more nuanced and longer answer, Councillor Wilson, is we have until 2028 to spend the money. It is a multi-year construction project no matter what. Administration doesn't believe that we will see significant savings by holding off over a number of years, and we have already keyed up any potential consultants to be giving us advice on mitigation measures that we can employ to keep costs in line if we go ahead in 2022-23.
And just in response, thank you for that. I fully appreciate the answer. But if you do go back to your examples of material costs, wood, the example for wood, 200 to 300%, that has come, dropped significantly. Not comfortably that will continue to be the situation, but I feel, well, anyway, it may not be the right time to move forward on such a large project. I'm a little uncomfortable with the situation of availability of product, etc. Like you do say that you could source locally, but many things just cannot be sourced locally. So I'm a little apprehensive on that, but I would love to see the upgrades completed as well. But I am very comforted in the fact that it's the funding is there until 2028. So maybe delay in a year and pull the pin on 2023. Who knows? But thank you for that. I appreciate the answers.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I hope that the dog didn't eat your budget or your homework. Councillor Demota.
if that dog ate a budget, it's probably going to be full for a year. But yeah, I'll have comments on the overall later, and I appreciate the direction that Councillor Wilson's taken there, because I like to focus on the shiny things. Just looking at the skate park number there, I've worked a little bit with the committee over the last few years, and just from the municipality's responsibility, I'm wondering how that number became to what it is and what makes up that 927. Because I have a follow-up question from the answer.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship, for Councillor Demota. So that is based on the most recent design that past council received, I think, late spring, early summer of last year. And so that's the number that's reflected in the budget. The combination of the two is what is the last estimate for the go forward on the new design on the Diamond A parcel.
So 1 second, I apologize. From my experience and from what I understand, I apologize. You know, we're doing the multi-floor thing here. 927 is the overall number of the project. And I don't think that the municipality took on that responsibility. The committee went out, they've fundraised to, I believe, almost 50% of what the project's worth. So close to, I think, $450,000. There's other groups that have contributed to that. And I believe council's only committed to this point. And you know, I don't want to come across as the anti-skate park guy, because it's the absolute opposite. But as far as, you know, looking at the numbers that are in front of us and trying to make things a little easier for the overall sums, I believe that number should only be 300,000 because the committee has fundraised, and they've only asked CFEP to cover the half that they haven't fundraised for. And in the time when the new location came, I believe that there were some assumed new costs because of the move of where it is now to the new location. So instead of council making a commitment to make up for whatever was the gap, the number $300,000 was the agreed upon amount. So I think that number is a little off.
So, Your Worship, for Councillor Demota, you're exactly right in what the previous council committed to. The municipal contribution to that project is $300,000. It would be funded through debt and borrowing. The line item of CFEP donations which really is CFEP and donations of 627 is a reflection of the other portion of the project that would come from other sources. In the same way, any of the other capital projects that have grant funding attached, for example, if they have MSI funding or ICIP funding, that funding is still reflected in our budget. Ultimately, it would likely be the municipality that would do the construction of the project. We are currently holding funds that have been donated from external groups to the skateboard park. The municipality is actually holding those funds on behalf of the skateboard park. They're literally in our bank account. And so, it really is a reflection of the cost of the project, but the municipal contribution to the project would be only that line item that is debt.
Up to $300,000. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions with respect to the community development capital budget? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Mr. Given. A lot of things to digest here. Your conversation about the AC envelope, activity center and aquatic center and so on, of 8.1 million. Do we have legislative requirements to fulfill with changing out things such as the ice plant that need to occur? And I take it we probably have had consultants tell us how the state of affairs are with the pool itself. Not familiar with the project at all, but I'm concerned that if we delay too much longer, costs won't go down. But I don't want to bump up against the fact that we're going to be forced to do something prematurely when we could have planned for it to comply with changes that may be required by the provincial or federal governments. And I'm specifically thinking of the refrigeration for the ice plant.
Your worship, for Councillor Melnick. So to be clear, the arena ice plant relocation project is somewhat separate from this, and is needed because of the risk that's there. The current location of the ice plant directly across from the daycare and at an entrance to the municipal facility is an extreme risk, and we have been directed by the provincial government and occupational health and safety that we need to have a plan for relocating that ice plant. So that plan is underway. And when we do that, that will create some opportunities there. We've also heard from our external partners, in Tourism Jasper and, the Edmonton Oilers. I think, the community is well aware the Edmonton Oilers have trained here in the past, and there are improvements that they believe need to be made to the facility on that side, and others that they would like to see. On the fitness and aquatics side, we have brought in as a part of our due diligence work that was using the approved funding in 2021, we have brought in we're doing a structural review of the aquatics facility, checking really the facility from top to bottom. Early indications are that there are some areas where there is some advanced decay in some small parts of the structure. I won't suggest that it's anything significant that means that the roof is going to fall in, because I don't believe it's of that nature, but there is some areas where we're starting to see some significant decay. We are in December going to be doing some destructive testing. So at this early stage, it's been all non-destructive testing, basically by investigation. So electrical engineers, structural engineers coming in and sort of poking their head in and out of all the crawl spaces and everywhere else. And they've identified some areas where we need to do some more detailed testing of that facility that they're going to do in December. They've also identified that there are some significant challenges with the primary water service, municipal water service coming into the facility. So, this is sort of a collection of items along with the Fitness and Aquatic Center. And then the overall activity center, there are some improvements that we need to make with respect to accessibility. There was some earlier discussion about utilization of the lower floors of the facility if we didn't do sport and activity camps, and just really making better use of the entire facility. And we have to acknowledge that right now that basement floor of the facility is basically off limits if anybody has mobility issues, or at least very challenging to access, as is the curling lounge upstairs. And all of these are types of issues that are proposed to be addressed in the activity center renovation project. So you're correct with respect to the respect to the arena. There are absolutely some life safety issues that we have a responsibility to manage. Broadly, we have some concerns related to the quality of the infrastructure that's in place and its age that we're hoping to address, that we will address through the project. And then there are some improvements with respect to accessibility that would offer more utility and more use out of the building. Those are all part and parcel of this major project. I will certainly say that from the administrative perspective, we would advise council that the best approach where we can get the most for our dollar would be to advance the project in the coming 2 years, again with the assistance of a prime contractor, and also under a fixed price approach that will ensure the project happens at that price, because we don't any more than council want to see the project come in over budget. But again, that is all stuff, perspectives, the number of different perspectives and facets that council will have to consider this project from when it comes to discussion and debate at the committee meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Adds a lot more clarity as to the scope and just what is all involved.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Councillor Demota.
I might lean on Mr. Given's experience in a larger community on this one. Now, my wife's hometown is Estevan, Saskatchewan, and a couple of years ago when I was there visiting, went to go and watch one of her friend's kids go play in this fantastic new facility that they had. And when I walked up to it, it had Affinity Place on it, and naming of the arena and or the whole center itself, and some sponsorship money there. And I'm just wondering, I always think that, we never wanted to really go in that direction because we are Jasper, but we can be a feather in a cap to somebody's advertising and, to put their name on that. And looking at some of the challenges that we have going forward, I think that it might be time to start exploring, trying to find some, other types of revenue to help us be a little bit more cost effective in this area. And whether it's for the whole activity center itself or the arena, I think it might be time. And I'm sure that there might be some agencies, companies, or entities out there that might want to consider, putting a brand or putting their brand on our facility. Just an idea. I'm not sure how much experience you have from your old city in that way.
Your worship, if I may, I do have some experience, and it's a bit mixed, to be frank. It never delivers as much as you think it should, or as much as you want it to, from a municipal perspective. But it doesn't deliver zero. And so I would say that it is really, in my experience, sponsorships of municipal facilities really are there to provide for additional enhancements around, FF&E, enhancements to facilities and refurbishment on a regular basis, so that, maybe you get a new name sponsor and, their contribution allows you to refresh the furniture and the wayfinding and, really just update the facility on a regular basis. I have not seen, it's rare, and certainly coming out of COVID, where the businesses have had their cash has been challenged. My suggestion would be that it would be challenging to find somebody that's really going to pick up a significant portion of the capital cost. Not impossible. Yeah, not impossible by any means, but rare. The other thing that I will say locally and anecdotally is that there may be a desire from other organizations to enter into a collaborative relationship over, say, a 5-year time frame, where they might be interested in making enhancements to our facilities. I think a part of that would be for the municipalities to show that we're coming to the table with a quality facility that somebody wishes to be in, that they could enhance, rather than saying, well, we've got this old building, can you please do something for us? And so, again, that is all speculative, but that is certainly a strategy that administration could employ to try to identify additional funding, either to defer a part of the project costs, or to really enhance the project, so that when the major capital renovation is done, that we're able to really kit it out very well, so that it has the look and feel of a full refurbishment.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Wilson.
I just wanted to bounce back to the ice plant. So I voiced my apprehension of taking on any larger renovations at the activity center, because we have in front of us the ice plant relocation, and it's been on in front of us since 2017 when I was first elected. This is like a life safety item, and if it's been pushed on and carried forward that many years, 4 years, for me, before I can get behind any larger renovations, this needs to be completed. So I wanted to know if there is a plan for this happening in this year, or will it be carried forward yet again?
Thanks, Councillor Wilson, for the direct question. I know Mr. Greathead is on, and he can speak to the details of where we are in the process of that. I can commit that the there's too many A facilities, that the arena ice plant relocation will happen in 2022. Administration has been busy at work with consultants, and there were some challenges with some of our design consultants in the early stage, but I believe we've actually moved on to pre-qualification of vendors for that. And so, John, I'll ask you to give a little bit more detail about where we are in the stage of that process and when we actually expect to be breaking ground.
Thank you, Mr. Given. We have gone out and sought a pre-qualification of proponents to reinvigorate this project. We had some obstacles that were insurmountable previously. It took a while for us to clear the legal hurdles to be able to start this project back up again. And so we've been active with it for the last 6 to 8 months, guided by a consulting firm, WSP, who's been handling the call for tender and helping us evaluate the proposals. We've shortlisted down to 2 proponents. Both are eager. Both are telling us that they can have this project complete this summer during our downtime, and that the project can go through. So right now we've checked the references, and we have a meeting next week to make the final determination and award the proponent that we'll be working with going forward to carry this project through.
And just, Your Worship, if I can, I'll just add that, the municipality, certainly some of this predates my time here and Mr. Greathead's time here, although, we've both been involved since we've arrived. And, one of the observations that we had is we needed really to have project leaders and to be able to, get some progress on these things, because I think it is very frustrating to the community and to council when there's a desire and an intent and a commitment to moving forward with something that isn't realized. And we've learned from that experience in a couple of different projects. And, the observation, or I guess the thing that I would like to point council's attention to, has been our approach to both the Connaught Utilities project and our coming approach that we've already started to employ with the activity center renovation. In both of those instances, we've hired dedicated project managers who have been very successful at, to be frank, at keeping us on track and keeping us coordinated, because in-house, we simply don't have, my sense is that we simply don't have the in-house capacity to do that. The dedication of funds to having project management applied to the Connaught Utilities project is that in under 12 months, we conceived a project, designed a project, and constructed a project for a nearly $7 million project. And, I can report to council that it's and, we have some tidying up around the edges to do in 2022 when the snow melts. I believe that project will be under budget. So if we're able to deliver a significant project like that in that timeline and in the Jasper National Park environment, pretty much on time and probably under budget, I think that shows the value of project management. And we're applying that same approach to the activity center project as well. We have, and council, past council supported this, the award of project management services, independent of engineering services or any other consulting services. We awarded project management exclusively to WSP. Project Management Division, and that resource has helped us make more progress on the activity center renovation in the last 3 months than I think we've made since we received the grant in 2019. So I am confident that we
I just let Mr. Given know that we lost him, unless I'm frozen out and I don't know.
It looks like the rest of us are all here.
Yeah.
But Mr. Given is frozen in confidence. That was his last word.
Talking about an ice plant.
Well, given that we're waiting for Mr. Given to come back, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. I do appreciate Mr. Greathead's report about where we are on the ice plant, and it's very positive. It's, as Councillor Wilson said, it's been a long time. This is one that we have to get done.
Councillor Demota.
Given while he's here, and it's directly to him. By me.
I'm sorry, I only got part of what you said. It's
Oh,
directly to whom?
While Mr. Greathead's here, I have a question for him. While we don't have Mr. Given. With the design of the ice plant, is it still going to be the same design as the proposed one from the past, as a semi-permanent structure in case there is an expansion in the future, there is an ability to move it?
Your worship, to answer the question, it's going to be housed in a permanent facility. I think there was maybe a misconception in the terminology of a skid plant, whereas we should be actually referring to it as a package plant. So it's going to be a package that will be prefabbed offsite and brought in and set into place when it gets here. Part of the legal holdup that we had was getting the release of the original documents. So we did use those in the RFP when we sought out our pre-qualification for contractor for proponent, that we had those as guiding documents. So we had paid a significant amount and put a lot of effort into the design of that original plan, and that was something that we didn't want to lose, and we didn't want to have to reinvent the wheel. So that was another portion of the delay in this project.
Yes, I see you, Councillor Demota. I also see Mr. Given has returned, so I'd like to return to his answer. I will go back to you, Councillor Demota, for a question. I had a question, but just a reminder, we are now 40 minutes into the capital budget, and we're still on the first part of it. We kept staff overtime last night. I'd like to be able to release them at 9 o'clock tonight. But we do have legitimate questions, but we'll see where we go. But perhaps a little more haste would be helpful. Mr. Given, you were answering when you got frozen out.
Well, and I was on such a good roll, but Your Worship, I really can pause. I think my main point there was that the municipality is taking a different approach to managing major capital projects, and I appreciate the concerns that council had about some of the previous ones that haven't gone as smoothly or as quickly as we might have liked, and so we're applying a different approach, including dedicated project management, and we would propose to do the same for the activity center renovation project. There, I'll pause there just in case.
Thank you. Councillor Demota, did you have another question?
No, that's good. I want to speed things along. I'll save the questions for when it comes up again in front of council.
I have 3 questions, Mr. Given, and I'll try and be brief about them. I'll ask them all and then you can answer them, hopefully, also briefly. Firstly, with respect to the increase of about $1.1 million that you have projected on what you're calling the activity center renos, does all of that fall to the municipality, or is any of that picked up by other funders? That is one question. Second question, in terms of that project, if the budget is to be approved or were to be approved in the format that it comes before us, what are the next points of intervention by council? Or would that be authorization from your view to go spend money? I think we still need a borrowing bylaw, for example, and I am not satisfied that previous council had really confirmed what they understood the plan was, particularly with respect to dressing rooms and potential for elevators and all the rest of it. So I wonder what the next points of intervention might be, even if the budget is approved. And finally, going back to a question that Councillor Melnick asked, do you foresee any other potential liabilities for the municipality by not proceeding? So in terms of dressing rooms, for example, there were comments about what we were and were not providing and what we might be required to provide. There are health and safety issues, particularly with respect to the ammonia plant that have been discussed, but there may be others. And so just generally by delaying the project, do you have any sense that we are then exposed to other potential liabilities?
Sure, Your Worship. Thanks for the questions. So first, in terms of the ability to cover that overage through other funders, the provincial and federal grants are not expandable. That program is closed. It may be possible that we could go to some new provincial or federal grant program and apply for funds. But there is often limitations to how much you can stack a federal grant on top of another federal grant on top of a provincial grant. So my suspicion would be, unless they're for very different purposes. So we may be able to go and get a grant to put solar panels on the roof, but that actually isn't a part of the core scope of the project. And so it really would be an addition and not a reduction of the municipal cost. I think we are wearing this increase in cost because there has been a delay in starting the project, and that delay is our responsibility, not the provincial or federal governments. So I think that's your first question. In terms of intervention points, there are actually a number, and so council's consideration of this, and if council were to approve the project at the revised scope or any other scope, there would be a number of stops along the way. The first would be detailed design. Administration is proposing and will bring forward council recommendation for a prime contractor. A part of that responsibility of the prime contractor would be to work with the construction manager and other experts to deliver a detailed design before going forward to tender for construction. And so there would be a check-in point there. And then ultimately, in advance of that, we would need council support for appropriate borrowing bylaws. So there are a couple of stops along the way. I will say, though, that the borrowing bylaws are not an ideal stage gate or check-in point, because really a borrowing bylaw is to facilitate a project the council has decided to go ahead with. I would see the next real check-in point being, well, there are actually a couple. With respect to the Fitness and Aquatic Center, administration has intentionally, and with previous council support, undertaken a structure review of the facility to investigate, at a very basic level, on the aquatic side, is it worth investing money in? Before we spend a whole bunch of money in it, is it going to last us, with that investment, will it last us another 5 years, or will it last us another 50 years? And if the answer is it's only going to last us another 5 years, based on the investigation that the engineers are doing right now, then we would come to council with some different advice. That would be a check-in point. The second check-in point with respect to the overall project would be working with the designers to say, okay, well, this is what the scope of the project is. Here is the design of the project, and here is a detailed cost estimate. And each time you go through a revision and narrowing the scope and getting a more detailed scope, you can get better and better cost estimates. And so before we went to construction, issuing RFPs for construction or tenders for construction, we would have very detailed, very up-to-date cost estimates, and we would check in with council on that. Finally, your question about liabilities, certainly, the ice plant is the most major liability. As Mr. Greathead said, administration is advancing that project. And my understanding is that we had a responsibility to demonstrate that we had a plan for how we were going to address that. And we've long had a plan. it's now time to act on that plan. And so as Mr. Great had said, we're going to move forward, and the intention is to see that happen during our summer shutdown in 2022. With respect to dressing rooms and change rooms, the world is changing. We do not offer the level of accessibility, and it is not beyond the pale or beyond the imagination that the municipality of Jasper could see some form of litigation, because we do not offer a full range of accessibility in our municipal facilities in a number of areas, and whether that's access to the curling lounge upstairs, access to out of school care downstairs, or poor access in the change rooms, physical access. We could be at risk on the liability there. The other aspect might be with respect to gender and change rooms. Right now, we have a challenging situation with female hockey and trying to split across the change rooms that are there. And I think it's really inequitable the way that it's being approached right now. On the fitness and aquatic side, the trend really is to move away from gender-based change rooms onto family-style change rooms. And that would be something that we would consider along with accessibility, because we have relatively poor physical accessibility on the change rooms and the fitness and aquatic center. So those are all areas where the municipality may be exposed to liability and risk, even though they're not necessarily life risk. The other concerns that we have around risk are related to the physical infrastructure of the facilities, and it's just general deterioration.
Thank you for all of that. Any other questions for Mr. Given before we move on to, I think it's Protective and Legislative Services capital budget? Councillor Waxer.
Just a brief comment that in looking at some of the new projects, that some of them relatively small, it from my experience, it looks like it may be possible to have CFEP funding applying for some of those new ideas that are unfunded at the moment. So I just wondered if that had been considered.
Your Worship, I know administration is regularly looking for funding from any source that we can, other than taxpayers. I can't speak to whether we've identified some of these specifically as CFEP potential. And I think that there are some new limitations on the municipality's ability to apply for CFEP. So we'd have to check that. But certainly they would be items that we would address. And there are unfunded items in future years that would give us that time to be able to address it. There's a relatively small amount in this area of the budget for unfunded items. And again, if an item is unfunded in a current year, it can carry forward into the next year, and giving us time to identify alternate funding sources, or to see how it fits with the overall capital profile of a future year.
Thank you for that. Further questions? All right, Mr. Gibbon, I would invite you to move to the Protective Services, Legislative Services.
Well, Your Worship, at the risk of jinxing it, so to speak, we may have moved through the most difficult one of the capital lists because of the Activity Center Intervention Project and its scale and scope. But we'll move now into the Protective and Legislative Services. I know Ms. Nadon is here and available to answer any questions. Relatively small area in terms of capital projects. There are carry forward projects of the fire mechanical boiler room design, and then ultimately the boiler and domestic hot water replacements in the emergency services building. Significant new projects in 2022 are the first year, and I just wanted to identify that in both cases. We have 2 years of funding towards each of these projects in 2022 and 2023. So there's a fire command vehicle, the first year of funding in 2022, followed by additional funding in 23, and the fire engine 2 replacement. And Ms. Nadon can speak to the justification of those if council had any questions.
Thank you for that. Questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
In the 2020-2021 budgets, I think we had another engine replacement. Is this very similar, like the 350 carried over, or sorry, the 700,000 carried over 2 years. Are we replacing something similar as we've replaced in the last 2 years, or what is that? What did we replace, and are we replacing something similar? Because it seemed like it was very similar numbers as well.
Your worship, if I may, through you to Councillor Wilson, I believe the last truck we replaced was the rescue vehicle, which is a different type of unit, but you will see if you take a look further down in 2024, 2025, the aerial is a much bigger ticket item. And I think you're right that the budget proposed here is similar to what you saw previously, but that was for the rescue versus this is for engine 2. So it's an actual firefighting truck. The rescue vehicle is used for motor vehicle accidents, and it's not, from my understanding, it's not a fire truck, it's a rescue vehicle. So what we're talking about here is an actual fire truck.
And did they just time themselves out? Like, because I'm sure they're not that old, but I think there's some pretty high requirements provincially. Do they just get to a point that they have to be replaced, or can we get a fair few more years out of them?
Yes, exactly. So it's the National Fire Protection Association that sets those legislated guidelines. And after 20 years, the vehicle can no longer be the first line or the first truck that gets sent out. So I think our rescue got repurposed and can still get sent out to accident scenes, but just not as the main vehicle that we utilize. So directly to your question, after 20 years, we need to replace those trucks. So that's why you see them coming on a regular schedule, which is actually pretty easy to predict and manage.
Thank you, Councillor Demota.
Well, if we can ever level off our transfer payments, I think that it would be good practice just to have a fund to have a replacement program for those, because the standards keep changing, and you know, we've gone through a few since I've been here anyway, and I find that, you know, by the time we pay for one, it's time for a new one. So might look at a long-term plan. So it's not based on the users of the day, or, you know, the community members that might benefit from that protection, because it's an ongoing thing, and it should be a permanent placeholder somewhere, if it isn't already.
Your worship, if I may, to Councillor Demota, it's like you've been reading our homework. Absolutely. So the transfer to reserves in many instances really is funding fleet. Certainly, Ms. Malinchuk has done a significant amount of work in this budget to start to set us up for exactly what you're talking about, which would essentially be a fleet reserve. She has a strategy similar to what I mentioned in the utility side, where there's a 5-year strategy to get up to the appropriate level. Ms. Malinchuk is proposing the start of a 10-year strategy to get up to a level where we'd have enough in a reserve to handle ongoing fleet replacement. My experience has been that there will often be a fleet replacement in general and a fleet replacement specific to fire, given just the scale of the project, scale of the cost of some of those units. When you look at the aerial, and it's a $1.6 million truck. So that is not something, you know, you certainly can pay for it in one shot or with debt, but you're not taking a 40-year mortgage on an asset that you can only roll for, you know, 15 to 20 years. And so having that kind of reserve, and that would show up though in the operating side, as council well knows, as a transfer to reserves. We may find a better description for it at some point in the future, but that is exactly the process where we'd be collecting little bits of money every year to ensure that we have enough money in order to address future capital needs.
Well, and just because, you know, we're missing Councillor Keller or MP, and I can't really speak for her, but I know that would be music to her ears. So thank you.
Ms. Nadal.
Mayor Ireland, if I may, I feel compelled to recognize Mr. Van Diegem's work here. The Protective Services reserves are in good shape, and he had the foresight to put that money aside. And like Mr. Given outlined, they are large purchases, so we can't just wait until the last minute. And also, Mrs. Malinchuk has actually secured a lot of grant funding, which has been applied to our recent purchases, which allowed us to maintain our reserves at a healthy level. And that's why we can propose that we replace those vehicles with our existing reserves. And as you'll see for the engine 2, the source of funding is labeled as MSIC, so Municipal Sustainable Initiative Capital, and fire trucks are one of those items that fall in that category. So I'm thankful to them both for setting me up for success.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson.
Just like to touch on it. Do you have a game plan to knock off some of your carry forward projects? You know, they're getting close to $250,000, and just, yeah, have you kind of assessed that, and do you forecast those getting knocked off the list this year?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson, for the question. A few of them were actually in process, and we've ran into some engineering and design items. So for example, the sidewalk and parking plugs. So the front sidewalk has actually been replaced at the fire hall. So you might remember there was bricks there that were crumbling, and it was a health and safety item. So that's been replaced with poured concrete. And the engineering for the parking plugs, which sounds a bit as like an interesting project, but essentially the way the pedestals are positioned is not ideal, and they're broken, and it's important that our firefighters can park there and utilize the services. So that is in progress, and we are waiting on some engineering. And I have less detail on the boiler and hot water replacement, but that is being worked on in collaboration with Mr. Hutton in the operations department, because it's part of the building, Gord is involved. And I'm not sure why there was a delay there, but just I think in our ability to complete projects within the year is it's always a bit of a challenge. And that being the largest one, I think it's something that's being worked on.
The other thing that I'd just supplement, Your Worship, for Councillor Wilson, is that there really is a shared responsibility between departments to make sure that projects between departments within administration, and also with council to make sure that projects get completed within the current year. I know that we have room to grow on administration in terms of our project delivery, as I was speaking to at length before. But this is also a bit of a reflection of relatively, a later approval of the budget in 2020. And that is a part of the reason why administration is seeking a approval of the capital budget by the end of the year this year, so that we can be in a position to move forward with advancing projects and planning our work for the construction season much earlier, rather than trying to do it when trades or other contractors may have already filled up their book of work. So there is a shared responsibility. Administration certainly can do a lot better at advancing these projects and completing them within the year that they're sort of budgeted for. And we do need a little bit of an assist from council in giving us enough runway by approving a capital budget before the, with as much of the year left as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Other questions for Mr. Gibbon or Ms. Nadon? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Mr. Gibbon to Ms. Nadon, I guess our fire trucks coming up is probably because we were a municipality 20 years ago and we acquired some fire trucks way back then. And when you acquire a bunch of new equipment in a relatively short period of time, that's why you need to replace it in a short period of time. But one thing that I don't see in the capital, which I had seen in previous capital projections for this department, and as recently as 2-3 years ago, self-contained breathing apparatus for the firefighters, which again is one of those same type of units that have a set time. Was there an expenditure that I'm not aware of in last couple of years where we're actually up to code and we don't need to worry about it over the next 4 or 5 years? I'd hate to have that one pop up on us and then have to add it in.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Melnick. I would have to check on that one with our fire chief, Mr. Conti, and our deputy fire chief, Mr. Smith, are very knowledgeable and very on top of their capital replacement schedules. So if we don't see it in here, I take it's because we have replaced those units and they are forecasted to be compliant for the coming years. And you're absolutely right that every now and again we run into a change in standards or legislation, and that especially in this area for protective equipment, it drives the need to replace a a chunk of items that we usually wouldn't. We run into something similar with radios when there's a change in the provincial network for that. So for a few years, we had some radios on the capital list. And I can certainly follow up and confirm, but my understanding is that it is not required at this time. And like I said, I'm very thankful to both the fire chief and deputy fire chief for all their help with the capital list.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I am not an authority, but I seem to recall within the last 2 years, we did deal with self-contained breathing apparatus for firefighters. If there is nothing further with respect to the protective services and legislative services capital budget, I would invite Mr. Given to take us to, I think operations is next.
Yes, Your Worship, it is. I'll put that up on screen. So you can see here the capital budget summary for the operations area, just identifying some of the significant carry forward projects. The Connaught Utilities Servicing, although that project is largely complete, not all the payments have been made. We've done progress payments along the way, and there is still work to be completed in 2022. Boardwalks, there are 2 items that are in the carry forward area that don't have funding attached to them. These may be candidates for council to either move to a future year or to remove from the capital plan. Boardwalks was a concept in response to COVID that the municipality might construct essentially boardwalks and lease them out or rent them out in collaboration with business owners or 2 business owners. And the streetscape study is really the concept of looking at developing a master plan for how we might handle future capital improvements and operations in the Patricia Street downtown core area. Significant new projects under roads, we have road repair, and under roads there is a loader. And then there are significant unfunded projects, specifically in general maintenance. There is a boom lift, and then which is the vast majority of that unfunded cost in this area. And then there are some smaller projects. Specifically, administrations identified the opportunity to do refurbishment plans for both Robson and Lions Park. They're represented as unfunded items, so they currently don't have any funding attached and would not move forward unless council chose to fund those items. But we're aware that there, is an opportunity to really enhance the use of both of those green spaces, but that it should be done in accordance with the plan and in collaboration with our partners. Certainly at Lions Park, the Lions Club would be a partner there. And then council is aware of the discussion around the establishment of a mountain bike skills park on lot GA on the west end of Connaught. Administration will be bringing forward a proposed operational agreement with the Jasper Bike Club. And in that, we're foreseeing that there may be a need for the municipality to contribute to some small capital items. So this would not be a major capital project to do to create the mountain, the skills park. That would fall on the club. But as a partner in that, we would see that there may be some small capital items like signage, waste receptacles, and other small items that we should be, if we were going to be a partner on that project, we should be coming to the table with something small to be able to support that. Administration's identified that need at a very high level and reflected in the plan, but is not currently funded in the 2022 base capital budget. Your Worship, with that, I'll turn it over to council for any questions they might have about the 2022 capital for operations.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions? Councillor Wilson.
A couple questions. I guess the first one would be the loader. It's a big ticket item. Not suggesting we don't need it, but it's under roads and it's funded by MSIC. Are we at a point where we need a new loader? I know there's a loader operating, daily, and when we need a second one, could it not be contracted? Could this money be reallocated to roads, other, maintenance of roads or improvement of roads? Do we need another new piece of equipment imminently at this time? I guess that's my first question, and then the other one's about the boom lift.
Mr. Greathead's obviously best to handle the detailed questions about the rolling stock.
Your worship, to speak to the question on the floor, yeah, I'm convinced that we're due to replace this loader. It's past its expected life cycle already. And when we do have some downtime with it, parts are harder to source due to its age. It's like one of those things, as soon as you go to repair the light, you need to repair the wiring and then the connection on the harness. And it's kind of at that age, especially given the use that it sees. We anticipate to down cycle this loader, so it's not going to just disappear and we're not going to stop using it. But what it would be, the one that we're currently using in place or using now would be going to the waste transfer station to handle the biosolids and the composting operations over there. And that's the one that's at the waste transfer station now. Is definitely its best days are behind it. It's pretty hard to keep it going at this time. As for contracting out, each manufacturer has a different hookup system for the implements. And our loader is fit, and we had to have the hooks made specifically for the snowblower that we're using now to match our loader. So that's why we would have trouble finding a replacement on short notice. To make sure that snowblower that we're using on the loader would fit and would have the proper controls and everything that would be needed, because that snowblower is the backbone of our operations and removal system.
No, thank you for that. And I know you had the answer for it, and it's a big ticket item. I had to ask the question, right? I guess my follow-up question was the boom lift. How often is the municipality in need of a boom lift? And again, would it not make more sense, instead of a $150,000 purchase, to contract when needed? Because I know there are about 3 or 4. Is it a man lift or is it a telehandler, I guess, is the question too. And that might be getting a little bit further into the weeds, but there are these I know they're not used daily or weekly even. So would the municipality need that piece of machinery to be used on a weekly or monthly basis, or could it make sense just to contract that service?
Your worship, just to answer that, that would be the piece of equipment that would actually probably pay itself off the quickest out of anything that we ever bought. Just our banner program, we incur about $6,000 a year in costs, renting and contracting that work out. Just swapping the banners over along cannot. There's a lot of work that we don't get to in a timely fashion that we could if we had that machine in our stable. I'm thinking of the fan at the Library and Culture Center, that it makes all that noise for the council chambers. Something like that, we could get up there and do an inspection if we had that. But for us to try and rent a man lift for a day and get that scheduled in, and then hopefully nothing more urgent popped up for the day that we had scheduled the man lift, and contractor availability, really there's only 2 or 3 in town that we're able to ever procure. So and that piece of equipment, it would improve our efficiency, improve our response time, and I believe that it would be one of the items that would pay itself off the quickest.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I agree with the banner project, but if you want to go check out that fan, I'll show you how to get on that roof.
If I might just interject on the same issue, and this is just edification for me, I suppose, but Councillor Wilson just asked about the boom lift, but also appearing on the capital plan for 2025. Sorry, losing power. Appearing on the capital budget for 2025 is a Zoom boom for $500,000. What is the difference between the boom lift and the Zoom boom?
The Zoom Boom is an alternative. It does have, they each have their unique features. The Zoom Boom has a much higher lifting capacity. Mind you, you need a special attachment for it to use if you're going to use it to lift people up. You need a proper platform and cage for that, as opposed to just the forks or the loading mechanism. I think that Zoom Boom may have been a duplication. You know, I think we can make do with one or the other. If we do have, you know, I'll just use the term a genie boom or a man lift, that we can go around that's maneuverable and will give us access to different points. I think that's where we're going to be best ahead with our purchases. Were we able to have a dexterous man lift, for sure, you know, we could forego the Zoom Boom and you know, for those heavy lifting services, contract that out. So really it's one or the other. The Zoom Boom has been a thought for the long term. That's why it's fairly down the road.
All right. Thank you. If anybody's keeping score, that's $500,000 to me. All right. Other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Well, just as there's to fill the air, you know, just again, just picking out the higher priced ones. Well, this one's not that higher price, but it's turf maintenance equipment. Last year we committed to some type of turf or aerator, etc. No, or we did not. I see Rico shaking his head. So we nixed that one. Is that similar to what we? So it's back on the table, or what is the turf maintenance and what's it going to do for us?
Worship, to Councillor Wilson, we do need some turf equipment. An overseeder is something that we feel would be quite valuable. Roughly only, if you're lucky, only 20% of the actual seed that you put down would actually catch before it gets eaten by birds or blown away and doesn't end up where you're going. But we're incurring a lot of cost and worker injury from pruning weeds by hand, since we are not allowed to use herbicides in the park on our sports field. So by overseeding, and we want to be able to have one that actually plants the seed right into the ground, so it does take, we do have a higher efficiency. The denser the grass, the more choking out of the weeds it will get, and the better use of our grass seed would be. We spend about $5,000 a year on grass seed, so 20%, you know, that's a $4,000 saving minimum right there. And our fields will look better, as well as the other, you know, some of the other turf equipment that we're looking for is a tow behind. Fertilizer spreader, right now we're doing it by the push carts. It's very labor intensive. I think we're, instead of buying the piece of equipment, we're paying for the labor, and that labor, if we had the equipment, could be spent elsewhere. So again, it's just more efficiency and a better result is all that we're looking for.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Greathead? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have that development for the new police station that is going to occur at the east end of town. Are there any capital expenditures that we should be planning to deliver services to that site, or are they already readily available to be brought there, perhaps not on Connaught, but along, I guess it'd be Bear Hill? Thank you.
Your Worship, we discussed this with the SNC, I believe, is the project manager on behalf of the RCMP for this. We've reviewed the designs and the plan for them for their services is they'll be able to, they will have to trench across Connaught and hook up to the water and sewer across there. They will have to install a small lift station to manage their stormwater. And from there, they'll be able to direct their stormwater into the ditch on the east and south side of Connaught, where it will drain naturally towards Cottonwood Creek. So we've worked with them to reduce some of their hard costs and some of their design costs. But as for bringing services to them, it's typical. If someone wants to hook up to the utilities, as long as they're there, the onus is on them. It's not like Connaught where we would need to drag new lines in. So the responsibility at this point is on them. Our most recent meeting that I had with the RCMP about 2 to 2.5 weeks ago with Mr. Michaud, you know, we said, like, so these are what the expectations are of the municipality, that there's no further capital costs, that you're not expecting anything from us. And they said, no, we just, as long as they don't run into any unforeseen circumstances, like a great big concrete thrust block or something that would impair their ability to easily hook up, then I don't foresee anything. So I don't expect any costs to be incurred by the town for them to hook up to our services.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wilson?
My apologies. I just have 2 more questions, and it's regarding water. So residential water meter upgrade, it's got a price tag of about $800,000. I think it's funded by the federal gas tax. What's the benefit of, and I'm assuming there is some benefit to the upgrade, and then also following up the sewer flow meter. What does that do, and what are the benefits of it?
And I'll just acknowledge that I have a whole slide on the utilities section. So if council's ready to move there, I can highlight those items. Sorry, and we had just broken them apart because they're funded slightly differently. But your worship, I'm happy to advance that slide so that everybody can see the summary slide, which is exactly, once again, council is ahead of administration. So I get a sense that there's a desire to move forward, and I can put that slide up if council would like.
Yes, go ahead.
There you go. And this is here for council, Mr. Greathead. I know that you heard the question about the sewer flow meter and the water meter upgrade, both significant projects that are listed there under significant new projects. You can absolutely go ahead and speak to those, John.
Thank you, your worship. To speak to Mr. Wilson's question there, the sewer flow meter. It's something that we did a sample one, a sample flow meter. So it's portable. It's battery operated. We were able to collect an awful lot of data, and so what we used that for was to find out the actual volumes of the sewage line coming down from Whistler's, to see what the flow was. And we used that to compare, to check the accuracy of the funding formula that Parks pays the town for the cost of campers. So they had a formula that based on the number of campers per night, and there's a factor. So what we did when we put the sewer meter down is we found that the equation was off by quite a bit and not in favor of the town. So this is another, and it goes hand in hand pretty much with the residential water meter upgrade. With the water meters, when we get a failure, we're seeing or a complaint, or we send the meters in for retesting, we find that they have a loss built over time of about 8 to 12% on average. Some are as high as 20%, where there's just the materials and the minerals that build up and slow down the impeller down, and water gets by as the impellers wear out and such. So we're seeing some loss. So this is, again, us tightening up on our assets, and making sure that we're able to quantify the volumes and charge an accurate and fair values for our services. So that's what those are for. The flow meter itself, it's not the expensive part. What we would need to do would be able to install a vault, so that way we can have the meter hooked up into a submerged full portion of the pipe. So what we had previously was just in-stream data logger, just to verify our suspicions.
Thank you for that. A moment ago, I saw a virtual hand from Councillor Demota. I also momentarily saw a virtual hand from Mrs. Melanchuk. So Councillor Demota, go ahead, and then Mrs. Melanchuk, if that was intended to flag me down, I will go to you next.
Well, that's good because you can see my virtual hand, but I can't see your virtual face. But thank you for
my apologies.
Sometimes blessing.
If I could I will just explain. My iPad has not budgeted its power very well. And even though it's been plugged in the entire time, I'm down to 3%. So I've turned off my camera to see if I can save my last bit of reserves to get through this budget meeting.
Sounds like you need a Zoom boom. All right. I was just out of curiosity, like just speaking to this, because I think it might make all my questions just wrap up. Are there any transfers to capital from operations in this section of the capital presentation? Or is this all funded by utilities?
There you go. That, Your Worship, that sounds like a council question for Ms. Melanchuk. Natasha, can you speak to the funding source for the things in utilities, whether they're funded through the utility rates or whether they're funded with a transfer from the operating side?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Given. Through Your Worship, through to Councillor Demota, they are all funded through the utility side. So anything that goes into utilities through the levies and whatnot, any of the expenses that occur are offset by the revenues that we bring in by those utilities.
Okay, that's good. We've kicked the can down the road on many of these already, and I'm glad to see the carry forwards come through. And this is one of those things where I believe that we can make it up through the user fee. So I'm really, I'll take a deeper dive into this, but although the number is a bit high, I'm a little bit more comfortable in this area accepting some of the numbers here than in other areas. So I'm just making that as a statement. So thank you for clarifying that for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Looks like we're on utilities now.
Sorry, I thought because we were talking about meters, I might have got confused there. I apologize if I jumped us forward.
Your Worship, now that we can't see you, we'll never know if we lose you, other than checking the list to see if your name's still there. And I see that it is. If there weren't any other questions, I could move on to the finance and administration area, which is the last of our capital budget areas.
I see no hands raised, so go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Your Worship. For the finance and administration area, in terms of, and you'll see that the term significant, the size of what is significant varies department to department. In this department, it's obviously a lower threshold, although not as low as $40. There is a K missing from the end of that. So significant carry forward projects, asset management software. You'll see that there is both a carry forward and a new project for asset management software. In 2021, and when administration was looking at that, we identified an opportunity to improve our processes. But essentially, as we went through the process of investigating that, identified that the appropriate solution is actually more expensive than initially projected. And so what we're proposing to council is combining those two. Budget review, this is a carry forward. Council in 2021 approved additional funds to help support the transition to priority-based budgeting. That work is still to be done, and it really is in creating the service profiles and really taking them down to more individualized levels, and then also doing the evaluation. So administration still intends to do that, as I've described earlier in the budget presentation. And we see that there would be a need for additional resources to supplement Ms. Malinchuk's team to undertake that effort. The virtual City Hall project, Ms. Malinchuk can talk about, and again, that isn't $40, it is $40,000. And on the significant new project side, there is an allowance in the budget of $150,000 for design and some construction of new office and meeting space. That really is related to trying to take advantage of the activity center renovation project. There was some discussion about this the other day. And really looking at how we can better more efficiently utilize the office spaces here in the admin and activity center. Network infrastructure upgrades to ensure the stability of our internal network, and then also some storage and a server to improve information hosting and sharing internally for staff use. A very small unfunded project. Council asked some questions the other day when we were talking about visual identity. At the time, I answered that administration's current approach would be that we would just replace visual assets other than the website, sort of on an ongoing basis as we're able to. We have an unfunded item in the budget over the course of 3 years of $7,500 per year that would allow us to make more specific and dedicated progress on that by replacing signage on municipal facilities, vehicles, and other hard assets to conform with the potential new logo and brand that would be coming forward in the new year. If council didn't see fit to fund that in 2022, then we would implement the new logo on the web and on an electronic format. And as things were being replaced, and as we could within existing budgets, we would sort of make as much progress as we could on implementing that visual identity. But that is the finance and administration area. I know Ms. Malinchuk is here to be able to speak to any of the other additional details that council might have questions about. And I will say, I will actually also that the text of my presentation is correct, but the table is incorrect. There is not $3 million of carry forward projects in the finance and administration area. So my apologies to council and to Ms. Malinchuk for letting that table slip through. You can see that that is actually titled utilities. And so that is one that got through. There's actually only $8,500 of carry forward projects. The table is incorrect, but the text identifying the significant projects is correct. Now I'm totally going to turn off that slide to get rid of that table that I made that big mistake on.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. I'm still at 3%, so I'm brave enough to have my camera back on. Might I just ask, with respect to page 55 of 56 of the budget document, the revised or amended budget document that we received, there is one line below the carry forwards, 20% of roof access, with on my screen, no amount ever. Is that just included in error, or did an amount get left out? And if so, what amount and when might it be spent? And similarly, the line below that is again, virtual City Hall. And I take it that's just a duplication of the line in the carry forward amount.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm glad that Mr. Given had a whoopsie, because I have had some during this process, because we look at this so much, it's hard to catch some of the errors sometimes. So yes, this is the virtual City Hall is a duplication. I should have hidden that before putting it into the spreadsheet or into the document. And the virtual, or sorry, the 20% of roof access, I believe is still to occur. That is an operations department thing that they do for us, but I believe that that will be a carry forward for the next year. So I don't see the funds coming through on that one. So I believe that we still have to carry that one forward.
Okay.
It's a small ticket item.
I thought it would be, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Other questions then from councillors with respect to the administrative proposed capital budget?
Did we lose?
His name is not there.
All right.
His work,
He is out. I'm in.
You got the chair.
All right. So any more questions regarding the finance and administration capital budget? Well, I think we're, Councillor Demota.
I don't on this, but overall, I do have an overall comment that I want to make and just plant a seed in council's head.
Go ahead.
If no one has any questions. Okay, going in, I remember getting my little binder when we got all our things together, and I really appreciate it. I love the structure on this. When I saw the number being over 16 as far as an increase goes, I didn't factor in at the time that there was COVID relief money in there. And, you know, I still believe that, I won't get into the details of that, but without that money in there, it's looking more like an 18.5% budget increase over last year, maybe even 19. So I would like through the process to have administration, if it's council's will, to hold hands with us and help us find some low-hanging fruit, to help us find where we can find some easy savings. There might be some painful ones that we're going to have to make decisions on, and I'm grateful that we have all of this out in front of us, because I don't think that there's much that has been missed. It's all in front of us, and now it's time to make some harsh decisions. And unfortunately, it's at the beginning of this term, but I think it's a good time for us to do this. So, you know, thinking about an 18.5% or almost $10 million budget, that's a big jump. And, you know, and some of that stuff in there is going to be necessary, but I don't think that I can go forward with that. So the reason I'm saying this right now is that I think we're going to have to sharpen our pencils here. And I'm not a big fan of kicking stuff around down the road. There's things that we can't move forward any longer. But we are still in a pandemic. We're still growing out of this. Our visitation to our number one funding source, you know, is going to slowly grow. And I think that there's still going to be a little bit of pain in the non-residential sector. So I think we should consider all those things. I appreciate your time. I just wanted to make those points. Sorry you missed part of that if you did, Your Worship.
Thank you. And the chair goes back to Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wilson. And I understand that handoff was seamless, or almost so. So thank you for that. So I take it then we concluded the questions on the capital budget for administration. Some closing remarks. I guess if there are no further questions, I just want to confirm the timeline going forward, perhaps with your assistance, Mr. Gibbon. Tuesday of next week, we have added a committee of the whole meeting, it being a fifth Tuesday, but I think we're on board for committee of the whole at 9:30 a.m. next Tuesday in any event. So a discussion day, and Mr. Gibbon, can you confirm capital budget primarily for discussion, or both capital and operating?
Your Worship, if I can, I actually have some concluding slides, and I know that you are trying to help administration get out of here, and I also know that council, it's been a long night for everybody involved, but I can sum up, including the schedule, in a few concluding slides. If council would like, I will run through them on 1.5 speed for anybody that listens to audiobooks. But I will, if that's okay with council, I'll share these concluding remarks about the 2022 budget. presentation, which will include the schedule. So
And
2022.
Interrupt for a moment, Mr. Given. If my device fails again, I will simply leave it to Deputy Mayor Wilson to adjourn this 2-day marathon meeting.
Of course, thanks, Your Worship. So Budget 2022 is largely reflective of the past council's priorities, as we discussed about that planning, strategic planning and budget planning cycle, and is also a continuation of our community's path of recovery from the pandemic. Budget 2022 also proposes just 2 new positions in the municipality, one of which, the municipal energy manager, was previously reviewed by the last council, and the second of which, the policy review coordinator. Both of those positions are largely funded by external sources in 2022, with just a small amount funded by the municipality of Jasper. Budget 2022, as presented and proposed, also makes significant headway on asset management by beginning our slow and thoughtful process of increasing funding through utility rates, as well as by finally beginning the long overdue activity center renovation. The municipal budget is facing pressure, as administration identified at the start, from both global factors and localized ones that are particular to Jasper. Those global factors include increasing costs for goods and labor, as well as increasing transfers from the municipality of Jasper to both the provincial and federal governments in the form of increased land rent or resumption of regular land rent and increased policing costs. Additionally, the municipality will be paying the cost of debt servicing for a number of large capital projects beginning in 2022, including the Connaught Utilities installation, which is intended to support additional housing for the community. The new council will have a significant opportunity to put your stamp and influence the 2023 to 2026 budgets through your upcoming strategic plan and the process of priority-based budgeting as administration described in day 1 of the budget presentations. We know that council and the community are often interested in the net tax envelope, and that's been a practice in Jasper to demonstrate how that looks. So in 2021, the net tax envelope was just over $8 million, with an additional amount supported through the MOST grant. In 2022, additional costs that have to be covered in the net tax envelope include a reduction in the reuse of the COVID recovery reserve. So stepping that down, that's a $500,000 impact to the net tax envelope. The resumption of regular land rent, as I referenced before, is another impact that has to be handled in the net tax envelope. That's just over $200,000. The beginning of those new debt servicing payments that I referenced, that's reflected in our budget at a cost of approximately $423,000. And our increased investment in asset management and repair and maintenance of our capital across the municipality. That's just under $200,000, $195,000. So all told, those additions are items that need to be supported through the net tax envelope. And as you can see, they are not items that are discretionary in most cases. The two that are somewhat discretionary would be the $195,000 with respect to asset management. We could choose to have a slower pace with respect to maintaining our capital assets. The other item that is discretionary is the use of the COVID recovery reserve. Last year, council mitigated the major jump from the 2020 budget action by applying $1 million of COVID recovery reserve to mitigate the impact on residents and businesses. Administration is proposing to use $500,000, but that does mean that residents will start to feel the increased cost through the net tax envelope. Council could choose to use more of the COVID recovery reserve, but it is a one-time only funding source. But that is an area where council does have discretion. As a reminder, administration is recommending using $500,000 in 2022 and $250,000 in 2023. But those are the major items that are impacting the net tax envelope and the difference between the 2021 year and the 2022 year. In terms of proposed decision-making timelines, as Mayor Ireland was just getting to, council now faces the difficult decisions of actually choosing what goes into the budget, what doesn't, and what ultimately gets recommended forward to council for approval. Administration will be bringing a very light RFD to the November 30th Committee of the Whole meeting, where we will essentially be providing a recommendation that council approve the capital budget as presented, or alternatively, that council approve amendments to the capital budget as council sees fit, and then council approve the capital budget as amended forward, so that it could go to the December 7th council meeting for ultimate consideration and approval, either as presented or as amended, and with whatever amendments the council might wish to approve at committee. Then December 14th, we would bring a similarly brief RFD that would front the operational budget package. And again, at committee, council will be in decision-making mode, and you'll be called on to either be making amendments to the operating budget and then forwarding the budget as amended to council, or approving the budget and forwarding it to council without amendments. Ideally, that would happen so that the operating budget could be approved at the first regular council meeting in January. And as noted last night, we don't have council meetings on Friday, so that would be January 4th, not January 7th, that first regular council meeting. And so that's the timelines that administration is proposing. It will be up to council now, and this is your burden and responsibility, and of having to make some of the difficult decisions and balance off the needs of the community, along with both the current and future needs of the community, along with the municipality and community's capacity for action. Well, all the while knowing that ultimately your council's priorities will be set early in the new year and will be largely reflected through that process of priority-based budgeting in the 2023 and beyond years. And so, Mayor Ireland and Council, that is the conclusion of administration's presentation of the 2022 budget, and the next steps will be up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor DeBoda.
Yeah, I just want to say the one of the struggles I'm going to have having to deal with capital first is not really understanding the transfers to capital from this operating budget, and some savings that we might or we could incur if we decided to push back, go forward, or carry forward. So I'm not saying that we should. I'm just saying that we might have to consider some options. So I hope that there is that, and we used to get a breakdown of what the increase means to a resident per $100,000 and a non-residential for a certain amount. Are we going to see any of that information? Mr. Given?
Administration can absolutely provide that. We did in the context of the presentation and applied it at a sort of rounder numbers that are more realistic, right. But it's not a big deal, and administration is in a position to provide that at committee when we talk about operating.
Well, and if it's just that stuff, then that's fine if it's available, just so that it's easy for people to understand. If I have an $800,000 home, this is it. If I have a $10 million business, it's that, and what those are. But I think that going forward, had I the $500,000 in there from the COVID relief, I would like to see a budget if it's going to be something like that. I'd be looking at going, okay, well, we can look at 16.5%, but not with COVID money in there, and then we can apply it afterwards. So I think we got to do something to make this a little bit more palatable, and I'm looking forward to the work.
Deputy Mayor Wilson, I think you're up. I think I see that Mayor Ireland's name has gone off the list again. So I think in terms of actually concluding the meeting, I think it's going to be over to you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so it is 9:15. We've overstayed our welcome, I think. And thank you to administration, to everybody who stayed late. I'm not sure there's too many residents watching, but they will in the future and on Zoom. Thank you for spending the time with us. Thank you, council. Do I need a motion to adjourn? May I have a motion to adjourn just in case? Councillor Demota, thank you. All in favor? None opposed. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the 30th.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks, Mr. Given. Thanks to your staff.
Thank you.